This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 312 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. It is about giving back when we travel. First, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I am recording this podcast today. So giving back when we travel, or travelling for good, is something that I think a lot of listeners to this podcast in particular are probably keen on doing and probably have already done in lots of different ways. I actually went looking to see what the data says. Now, one of my favourite places to look at trends over time is to go to Google Trends. So if you haven't had a play around in Google Trends before, you should spend some time there. It's I find it really fun. But what it does is it gives you information on the trends of people's Google searches over time. So you can see are more people searching for a particular search term in particular countries or at particular times of year. But anyway, in this case, it very heartwarmingly, I think, told me that people have been searching for topics like travel for good at a significantly increasing rate in the past few years, especially since the pandemic, but it was already on the rise before that. So that is good news, I think. I will add a quick screenshot in the show notes so you can see what I'm talking about. I also did a bit more reading because there's some really good stuff being written on this, and I will leave some links in the show notes for this, but I read Joanna Haugen's article on the perils of giving back. Joanna's been a guest a few times on the Thoughtful Travel podcast, and she is really good at really clearly defining the key issues and, explains that, of course, the concept of giving back is, of course it's a good thing to want to do, but as with most kinds of thoughtful travel, there are bad and good and better ways to do it, and there are some ways where you might be actually doing harm rather than good. I recommend reading that. And her article also includes a kind of an example case study of her own experience in Lake Tahoe last year. And funnily enough, as I was Googling travel for good, one of the top results was an article I knew well, actually, from my dear friend Carolyn Beasley. And she wrote on this topic for the Australian Geographic magazine recently. It includes lots of good stats, also backing up my assertion from above, from earlier, that more and more travellers genuinely want to do good. And her article has a good overview of the kinds of travel that fit into giving back when we travel. So, also in the show notes. Now, my first guest today is Roger Smith from Echidna Walkabout, and Roger talks about the importance of giving back from the perspective of a tour operator and how he deals with it. And he has, as usual, from Roger, some wise words and also a short example.
Giving back should be part of every tour in one way or another, and also talking about it as well. And I want to mention both those things. I'll start with talking about it. You need to tell your guests that you are giving back. In other words, they need to know that part of what they're doing on the trip is actually, giving back. Like, for instance, we buy our food locally. We do that because it's good for you to know that, so to speak. You don't have to overdo it. And we are using cutlery, plates, and what have you that are not going to be that can be recycled. In other words, we wash them and reuse them. We're not using plastic water bottles because we're going to be wasting them and throwing them away. But you've brought your containers because you were asked to do that. In other words, we tell our guests things that we're doing. Mm-hmm. To do with citizen science, to do with conservation travel. They know that they are participating in giving back. It is, I've got to say this, Amanda, it is one of the most used expressions in tourism today. When people think of, if you ask a person what do they want in a tour, or what do they want to feel like they've done in a tour, they say, I want to give back. And there's so many other ways that they could say that, but for some reason, that's the simplest way of saying it. I want to give back. I don't want to be a traveller who moves through the environment and moves through towns, locations, environments without somehow or other giving back. I help people to understand just by paying for the tour, they have helped give back. But we've done it in an ethical way. We've worked to do it, in an ethical way. I'll give you an example that I was once involved in Africa, because the people that I travel with over there, that Janine and I travel with over there, we ask that they do something to help us give back. And I'll never forget one time we were going to a little village on part of one of our wildlife safaris, and the guide went and bought 4 containers of salt, the I don't know, 500-600 grams of salt. And I thought, wow. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, we're going to give this back to these people. And I said, salt, Well, one of the great deficiencies in this particular area is salt. And salt is like gold. And as it always has been throughout human history, because it's used for preserving things and all that sort of stuff. And he said, rather than us giving them money or whatever, we gave them salt. Another place we went to, we just bought a couple of bags of rice. And they don't sound like big things, but they were enormously important to those people. So that's a literal form of giving back, as opposed to, a different way of giving back.
But what I like about those literal forms of giving back is you 100% know that something useful is getting to exactly the right people. There's no extra people in the whole mix. It's not money that goes somewhere, which is also valuable in many ways. But those kind of examples are, you physically see something physically going to some people who need that. That's a really useful form of giving back.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I did chat further with Roger about this topic and the way his tours give back to local communities in their choice of accommodation, and that chat is in episode 301 on community-based tourism, so have a listen to that if you haven't already. Now, my next guests today are Ma Pages and Meg Jerrard from the Solo Female Travellers Club. They have this, it's a fabulous tale of giving back. So they run tours for women travellers, focusing on solo travellers who might want to join a group trip. And one of their tours is to Tanzania, and it includes a climb of Kilimanjaro. And they have thus been working with an incredible woman named Glory, who's founded the Tanzanian Women Guides Foundation. And so part of Ma and Meg's tours involves both working with Glory and a proportion giving back to this foundation. So hearing about all of this is, it's a real good news story.
Requirements. We didn't just want to launch a tour and just make money and just have a business, We wanted it to be meaningful in some other way that would make a difference in the travel industry. And in Tanzania, which was the first tour that we launched, the second after Iceland, that's in 2021, we already launched Iceland and Tanzania, we already went there. And in there, we've been going for it's going to be the third year now. So we've been making a difference. And in there, the gap is huge, right? Just to give you some numbers, there are around 10,000 porters on Kilimanjaro, right? And there were fewer than 20 female porters, out of the 10,000. So that's how bad it was, right? So, there were 2 guides, female guides on Kilimanjaro out of the 6,000 when Glory, our lead guide, started, right? 2, her and her friend. This is 10 years ago. It's not so long ago, right? And since we started to support her, and obviously this is all her work, right? We just support her financially. We support her, Meg did her website so that, she has the Tanzanian Women Guides Foundation website. Meg made it. Meg also made her personal website so that she can start to do also safari and Kilimanjaro herself directly with customers rather than having to work through an operator who are very exploitative of the situation of guides and porters, particularly women. So with her, we've been working to provide the financing for more women to become guides and porters. So what she does in the low season, March, April, May, what she does is she goes in the villages and she talks to the elders and the husbands and the brothers and whatever is the person that rules over the life of women.
Decision makers.
And convince them to let them become porters. So first she brings them as porters in Kilimanjaro. Then the ones that she sees because you don't need any qualification to be a porter, right? You just need to be strong. And women in Tanzania carry their babies and the wood and the water and everything, right? So they're used to carrying 15 kilos. They were telling me this is no work for women. And she's like, we carry the baby and the water and everything. We're strong. We can do this, So she first convinces them to be porters. And then the ones that she sees speak English and have the interest and the skills to become guides, so from porters to guides, she then finds the financing from us, from our Kili Climb, where we donate a part from every guest, or from a donor that she has in the US that has been helping her for many years. She then brings them for a month to her home, and now she has a house thanks to the financing she's been getting. She has a dorm where she brings these women because they live in the countryside, right? They cannot suddenly you go to the city and you spend 4 months, you need lodging, you need food. But she needs to make sure that they're not going to waste the $400 that it costs to make the certification. So she first brings them for a month to teach them before they go on to the official one from the government, so she can be sure they will pass. Because she doesn't want the money to go to waste, right? So then the ones that pass her training, her 1 month training, then go on to the certification from the government, 4 months. Then they're certified guides on Kilimanjaro. Now, to take them from Kilimanjaro to being a safari guide, they need to get a driving license. These are women that many of them don't even know how to ride a bike, right? Let alone drive a car. So first they need to get a normal driving license, and then they need to get a truck driving license. And then we need to get them job opportunities. Like the cycle is very long, right? Then nobody wants to hire them, right? Because they have no experience and they're a woman. So they don't want to hire them. They feel like you're not prepared. You're a woman. What happens if the car breaks down? You're not good at this. So, there's like fewer than 6 safari female guides in Tanzania, right? So now we've been training them. So we keep them as trainees. So now in November, we will have the first safari where all the guides are women. We have 3 guides, all 3 of them. So it's going to be 15 guests, all women, plus me, and then the 3 safari guides, all women as well. So then we provide them employment opportunities. The same on Kilimanjaro. We bring trainees with us so that they can have the job.
And that was like the big thing for us too, though. Like you can't just, like that's the problem with a lot of like charity, in inverted commas, work, is that people throw money at someone and then just leave it. But you can't train someone with qualifications and then what do they do?
They're not going to be employed without experience.
Correct. So we needed the full cycle, and then as Ma said, we're kind of creating, we wanted to create the awareness, and we wanted to create, once people actually see these women on the mountain, other guests are now starting to say to their actual tour companies like Intrepid, why don't we have female guides?
Wow.
And those companies are now taking notice. Like they are now actually taking notice, because I think Intrepid this past year has launched an all-female climb of Kilimanjaro.
Ours is all-female guides and 60% female porters, because there aren't enough porters to make it 100%, although we do hope that by 2025 it will be 100%. But, they approach Glory and they're like, oh, we want to hire female guides. So one of the ones she hired and she trained, Glory herself trained and found and everything, is now working full-time for Intrepid. So in the end, we're not big enough to provide employment opportunities to these women all year round, right? So we want them to have an employment opportunity, to have the skill set to be financially independent and to not rely on their husbands and not everything else, right? So for us, that's success, even if they don't work.
It's still a success, yeah.
But, for women in Tanzania, it's very good to work in tourism, especially Kilimanjaro, because yes, you're away for 7 days on the mountain or 8 days, but then you can be home for 3 weeks of the rest of the 3 weeks of the month and make more money than you were making working full time, right? So it's great for them, right? They make a lot of money and they can choose to work less if they want to and still spend more time with their families and their children. So it's like, it's not just financial independence, it's also the flexibility that comes with it.
When you are on Glory's website too, though, she sent me the bios of all these guides, and I was literally putting this Meet Our Guides page together, trying to hold back tears, because some of these women submitted their bios and they're like, I'm a single mother and I was kicked out of home for this, and this is really giving me the opportunity to be financially independent, and I'm like, I really I have a hard shell now, but I really believe in this and feel for these women, and it's just to actually hear that this is actually changing people's lives in a real way, and in a sustainable way, not just throwing money at a charity and saying, here you go, here's $500.
Exactly, yeah, having an ongoing long-term impact. I love this project, and I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to Glory's Tanzanian Women Guides Foundation website as well, because you can read about some of the women she's helped there. It's pretty cool stuff. Now, my final guest today is Peter Baines from Hands Across the Water. He has been for many years now the force behind some riding tours of Thailand that are a really fabulous example of giving back.
It's an 8-day ride, over 800 kilometres. We ride for 4 days, have a rest day, then ride for another 4 days. And we've got a couple of different routes. They're all in Thailand, and we might start up in the far northeast fly into Udon Thani and then start riding from Nong Khai and ride down the banks of the Mekong River for 8 days, which separates Thailand and Laos. And it's a stunning ride, and particularly if you're over there in the wet season, all the rice paddies are this incredible green that, you look like it's you take a photo, it looks like you've enhanced it with a filter.
Yeah.
But
it's
the hashtag
real.
is no filter required. It's just stunning. And the other thing that's so beautiful about what we call the Northern Ride is that you're riding through communities, like tiny little villages, and people won't see another 20 bike riders until we go back.
Yeah.
It's a type of communities where foreigners just don't go. And, it's a funny thing, I fly over there and you'll be talking to, one of the air crew and occasionally there'll be a Thai national as the air crew and they'll go, oh, where are you going? And talk to them and go, oh, I'm going up into the Isan region and riding from Nong Khai down to through Ubon, Ratchathani, Mukdahan and I go, don't you love that place? And they go, I've never been. But it's so beautiful. So that's our Northern Ride. Mm-hmm. Then our traditional and our first ride starts in Hua Hin, which is about 2 hours drive south of Bangkok. And we ride south and we follow the coastline of the Gulf of Thailand for about 5 days, and then we head west and cross over through Chompon and pop out at Surat Thani, and then we ride down the Andaman seaside, and that's a 8-day ride as well. And then during the year we run these closed or private rides, corporate rides, whatever you want to call them, and normally it's a group that will come from either a company, an industry body, or a collective group of people who know each other who want to ride on their own or put the ride together, and we put the ride together for them. And most of those rides are 5 days with a rest day, and because that gives them the chance to only take a
week off. I love the fact that you're riding through small communities and getting to know or meeting some local people along the way, and all of these rides are also they're doing good, right? So tell us a bit more about that side of it.
Yeah, so it's the charity that I started was a direct result of the Boxing Day tsunami, and I was working in Thailand as a forensic investigator and leading the Australian team in the identification of the 5,500 bodies. And at the end of the tour, or at the end of my final tour, I met a group of kids who had all lost their family, and they were living in a tent. So I decided to start a charity to raise some money to build these kids a home. And that was back in 2015, and here we are today, 18 years on. And the bike rides, each of them has a minimum fundraising attached to the goal for each individual rider. And there's a really important part of it. It's fundraising for us, but what it also does is it forces the riders to engage in the experience well before they pack their suitcase. Because if you travel a lot, whether it's for work or whatever, sometimes, like I'm heading to Langkawi for work on the weekend, and like I'll engage with the trip on Saturday morning when I decide what I need to pack for the trip, right? Yeah. But with our bike rides, because you've got to do this fundraising, you've got to engage 6 months, 9 months out. So by the time they get to Thailand, the ride is the reward for the fundraising work. And it's, imperative for the work that we do. At the end of the ride, we finish at one of our homes. So each of the riders gets to see the project, see where their money's gone, connect with the community. There's that visibility, there's that transparency of how the funds are used, and it puts a nice full stop at the end of the ride for them to see what they've been fundraising for.
And yet it's probably such a profound experience that it's not a full stop at all, and it's probably just the beginning of a whole new chapter of their thinking about this.
You're so right. Yeah, we got a return rate of about 73% of our riders who will come back, and sometimes they might come every second year. We've got a group of riders who have been riding with us for probably 5 or 6 years straight. And that's tough when they've got to do the fundraising because, there depends which ride they're riding. They're either raising $5,000 or $10,000 on top of their tour costs. So, when people are doing that year on year, it just means, one, that it's so important to them. They take so much out of it. And it's a great thing for us to have the return riders.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's a huge return rate when you're thinking that's going to be like the effort throughout the year to raise funds, and it's, you know, probably at least half the annual leave every year and those kind of considerations. So, yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I really love what you said about the fundraising aspect makes them engage with the trip well before, because as part of the thoughtful travel kind of ethos that we always talk about on the podcast, I'm always banging on about how thinking about your travels before you go, significantly before you go, is a really important part of it. And so it's a really nice kind of added bonus of the structure of your trips, I think.
Yeah, it is. And we've seen where we've had riders turn up before who have had their fundraising sponsored by their organisation, and their tour costs even covered by their organisation. And it's a very different experience for them, because when you ride into the home on the last day, you've ridden either 500 or 800 kilometres, and you ride in with this sense of pride knowing what you've done. And I've had riders who have done that, and, you know, they'll walk up at the end of the first or second ride and say, now I understand what this is about, because they've visited, because they've had that full experience. And, you know, that thoughtfulness, it's hard to bring if you haven't been thinking about it prior.
As I said, I really love this component of Peter's trips where you are really paying attention to this, the trip and what you're doing and the good it can do for a long period, not just, you know, turning up somewhere for a week or two. Anyway, I hope that these stories have given you some more ideas and inspiration about the ways that travel can do good and how we can give back when we travel. There are so many ways. It is sometimes hard to find them, I think, or it's definitely hard to find ones that we're sure are good. Sometimes takes a bit more research or asking a few more questions. So, I hope to hear some more ideas and some perhaps good experiences. Do tell us what you've done to give back when you travel, perhaps in the Facebook group or the LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. I'll leave links in the show notes, but otherwise just Google Thoughtful Travellers look it up within Facebook or LinkedIn and you will find us there. Thank you so much to my guests for this episode. It was a real pleasure to discuss this topic. So some links and places to find out more. First of all, I chatted with Roger Smith from Echidna Walkabout, and you can find all his info at echidnawalkabout.com.au. Then I chatted with Ma and Meg from the Solo Female Travellers Club, which is at solofemaletravellers.club, and they have a massive Facebook group connected to that. And Glory's Tanzanian Women Guides Foundation site is at tanzanianwomenguidesfoundation.org. And finally, Peter Baines's Hands Across the Water organisation is at handsacrossthewater.org.au. I'll also leave links to those articles I mentioned by Joanna Haugen and Carolyn Beasley, and all of this stuff in the show notes at notaballerina.com/312. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.